The rope whistled through the air before it struck flesh, again and again, until the sound became a rhythm that matched the beating of hearts in the crowd, hearts that had turned to stone. Margaret Walsh counted silently. 97, 98. Her back was raw meat, the coarse fabric of what remained of her dress sticking to wounds that would never fully heal, not the ones on her skin, nor the ones carved into her soul. 99. The man with the whip, Samuel Hodge, the blacksmith, paused to wipe sweat from his brow. The October sun hung low over the Kansas prairie, painting the river red as blood, or perhaps that was just her vision blurring. 100. The final strike landed, and Margaret's knees finally gave way. She'd held herself upright through it all, refusing to cry out, refusing to give them the satisfaction. The rope binding her wrists to the post was cut, and she crumpled into the mud at the river's edge. Let it be known, Mayor Cornelius Blackwood's voice boomed across the gathering, that Margaret Walsh has paid for her sin of barrenness. 3 years wed and no child to show. The Lord's judgment is clear. The crowd began to disperse, women pulling their shawls tighter, men spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. Some lingered, whispering behind cupped hands. Margaret heard fragments. Cursed. Worthless. Better off dead. Her husband, former husband now, she supposed. Theodore Walsh stood among them, his new bride-to-be clutching his arm. Young Sarah Morton, barely 16, with wide hips and the promise of fertility written in her blooming cheeks. Theodore didn't look back as they walked away. The sun dipped lower, and still Margaret lay there, cheek pressed to the cool mud. The river murmured beside her, indifferent to her suffering. She could roll into it, let the current take her. It would be so easy, but she didn't cry. She hadn't cried when the physician pronounced her womb diseased. Hadn't cried when Theodore took up with the Morton girl. Hadn't cried through 100 lashes. She wouldn't cry now. Miles upriver, Caleb Stone was beginning to worry. His youngest, 7-year-old Emma, had wandered off again. The girl had her late mother's curiosity, and twice her stubbornness. Sarah, you seen your sister? He called to his eldest, 13 and already taking on the household duties that should have been Elizabeth's. She said something about finding pretty rocks by the river. Pa. Caleb cursed under his breath. The sun would be down soon, and the October nights came swift and cold. He grabbed his rifle, not for Emma, but for whatever might find her first. Wolves had been spotted near the riverbank last week. Thomas, you're in charge, he told his 10-year-old son. Keep the fire going. I'll be back. He followed the river path, calling Emma's name. His voice echoed off the cottonwoods, startling a murder of crows into flight. The dying light turned everything to shadow and gold. Emma! Emma Stone! You answer me right now! A small voice finally piped up. Pa! Come quick! He found her standing over someone, at the river's edge. His first thought was a body washed downstream. Then he saw the torn dress, the blood, the careful pattern of wounds. Emma! Get back. But Pa, she's hurt bad. Caleb knelt beside the woman, gently turning her face from the mud. She was breathing, barely. Her back was, Lord Almighty. He'd seen men flogged in the army, but never like this, never with such deliberate cruelty. Who did this to you? Margaret's eyes fluttered open, gray eyes, like storm clouds. She tried to speak, but only managed to croak. Don't try to talk. Caleb's hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking for broken bones, assessing damage. Emma, give me your apron. But Pa, now, girl. He dipped the fabric in river water, gently cleaning mud from the woman's face. She winced, but didn't cry out. Can you sit up? We need to get you somewhere safe. Margaret nodded weakly. With Caleb's support, she managed to rise to her knees, then her feet. The world spun, but she stayed upright through sheer will. What's your name? Margaret? Her voice was raw. Margaret Walsh was Walsh. Caleb had heard of the Walshes. Theodore ran the feed store in town, but this wasn't Theodore's business. I'm taking you to my place. It's not far. Emma, run ahead and tell Sarah to heat water. Lots of it. Yes, Pa. The girl scampered off, blonde braids bouncing. Caleb draped his coat around Margaret's shoulders, careful not to touch her back. "Can you walk?" "I didn't cry," she whispered. "What?" 100 lashes. I didn't cry." Something in her voice, pride mixed with devastation, made Caleb's chest tight. "No, I don't suppose you did." The walk to his cabin took forever. Margaret leaned on him when she had to, pulled away when she could manage alone. By the time they reached the small homestead, full dark had fallen. Sarah met them at the door, eyes wide with shock. "Pa, what?" "No questions now. Just help me get her inside." The cabin was simple but clean. Elizabeth's touches still lingered, the quilt she'd sewn, dried flowers in a jar, her Bible on the mantel. Caleb guided Margaret to a chair by the fire. "Sarah, those water ready?" "Yes, Pa. I've got cloth for bandages, too." Good girl, just like her mother, always thinking ahead. "Thomas, take Emma to the loft. This isn't for young eyes." "But Pa—" "Mind me, boy." Caleb had seen plenty of wounded folks, but treating a woman, especially with wounds like these, required delicacy. Sarah helped Margaret out of the ruined dress, both of them working in respectful silence. The full extent of the damage made Caleb's jaw clench. Whoever had done this had taken their time, made sure each strike would scar. This wasn't punishment. It was torture. "Sarah, honey and whiskey from the shelf." As they cleaned and dressed the wounds, Margaret never made a sound. Her face was carved from stone, but Caleb noticed how her hands trembled. "Why?" he finally asked. "Why did they do this?" Margaret stared into the fire. 3 years married, no babies. Town decided I was cursed, barren." The word came out like poison. "Theodore wanted a divorce and a new wife. Mayor said I had to pay for my sin first." "Sin?" Sarah's young voice was incredulous. "What sin is not having babies?" "Hush, Sarah." But Caleb's tone was gentle. The girl was right to be outraged. When they finished, Margaret was dressed in one of Elizabeth's old nightgowns, her wounds covered in honey-soaked bandages. She sat rigid in the chair, as if relaxing might break her apart. "You'll stay here tonight," Caleb said. It wasn't a question. "I can't." "You can and you will. Sarah, make up the bed in your room. You'll sleep by the fire tonight." "I don't mind." "Pa." As Sarah bustled about, Margaret finally looked at Caleb properly. He was perhaps 35, with the weathered face of a man who worked the land and the gentle hands of one who'd raised children alone. His dark hair needed cutting, and his clothes were patched but clean. "Why are you helping me?" Caleb considered the question. "My Elizabeth used to say that the measure of a person isn't in how they treat their equals, but how they treat those the world's cast aside. Your wife. Fever took her 2 winters back. I'm sorry. So am I." He stood, joints creaking. "But sorry doesn't get the crops in, or the children raised. We do what we must." Sarah returned. "Bed's ready. Mrs. Walsh." "Just Margaret." She tried to stand, swayed. Caleb caught her elbow. "Easy now. Sarah, help her to bed. I'll check on you in the morning." As the women disappeared into the back room, Caleb stoked the fire and tried not to think about the kind of people who'd count out 100 lashes on a woman's back. Tried not to think about how she'd held herself with such fierce dignity despite everything. From the loft, Emma's voice drifted down. "Pa, is the lady going to be all right?" "I hope so. Little one, now sleep." But Caleb himself sat up long into the night, rifle across his knees, watching the door. If anyone came looking for Margaret Walsh, they'd have to go through him first, and unlike the good people of town, he still remembered what it meant to be human. The fever came in the night. Margaret thrashed in the narrow bed, caught between waking and nightmare, her back on fire despite the cooling honey poultices. Sarah kept vigil, replacing damp cloths on Margaret's forehead, whispering prayers her mother had taught her. "I didn't cry," Margaret muttered, over and over. "Didn't give them... didn't..." Dawn broke gray and cold. Caleb found his daughter asleep in the chair beside Margaret's bed, hand still clutching a washcloth. He gently shook her shoulder. Pa? Sarah's eyes were red-rimmed. She was talking all night, saying things about the river, about stones being thrown. Caleb felt Margaret's forehead, still burning. Go rest by the fire. I'll take over. He'd seen fever dreams before, had nursed Elizabeth through her final illness. But this was different. Margaret's body fought not just infection, but something deeper, shame and fury warring beneath her skin. He prepared a willow bark tea, adding precious herbs from Elizabeth's garden. When Margaret's eyes fluttered open, he helped her drink. Where? Her voice was sandpaper. Safe. You're safe here. She tried to sit up, gasped at the pain. I should go. You don't need... Lie still. His tone brooked no argument. Those wounds need time, and you're in no state to go anywhere. From the main room came the clatter of breakfast preparations. Thomas's voice. But why can't I see her? Because I said so. Sarah replied, sounding far older than 13. Now eat your porridge. Margaret turned her face to the wall. Your children shouldn't... I'm not fit company. My children have seen hardship. They'll survive seeing kindness too. Something in that simple statement broke through Margaret's defenses. Her eyes filled, but still she didn't cry. Just lay there, tears sliding silently into the pillow. Caleb pretended not to notice, busying himself with checking her bandages. The wounds looked angry but not infected, yet he applied fresh honey, trying to be gentle, though every touch made her flinch. Emma found you, he said conversationally. She's got a gift for finding things, lost calves, arrowheads. Apparently people too. Tell her thank you. Tell her yourself when you're better. A knock at the cabin door made them both freeze. Caleb's hand went to the pistol at his hip. Stone, you in there? The voice was familiar. Dr. Henry Mills from town. Caleb relaxed slightly. Mills was a good man. One of the few. Sarah, let the doc in. The elderly physician entered, medical bag in hand. His eyes were troubled. Heard you might have a patient for me. News travels fast. Emma mentioned it to the Watson boy. Who told his ma? Who? Mills shrugged. You know how it goes. May I? Caleb looked to Margaret. After a moment, she nodded. Doctor. Mills examined her with professional detachment, though Caleb saw his jaw tighten at the extent of the damage. Clean work with the honey. Your Elizabeth's recipe? She learned it from her grandmother. Good woman. Your wife. These wounds. He shook his head. I wasn't there. Want you to know that I was delivering the Henley baby. Came back to find it done. Would you have stopped it? Margaret's question was barely a whisper. Mills met her eyes honestly. I don't know. I hope so. But hoping and doing are different things. Aren't they? He closed his bag. Keep the wounds clean. I'll leave laudanum for the pain. No. Margaret's voice was stronger. No laudanum. The pain will be considerable. I'll manage. Mills looked like he wanted to argue, but didn't. I'll check back in a few days. Caleb. A word? Outside. The doctor lit his pipe with shaking hands. They're saying she's cursed, that helping her brings curse on your household. They say a lot of things. Theodore Walsh is telling folks she bewitched him. That's why he couldn't get her with child. Mayor Blackwood's backing him up. Caleb spat into the dirt. Theodore Walsh couldn't get a cow with calf if you locked him in the barn with her. Despite everything, Mills chuckled. That may be, but the town's worked up. You sure you want this trouble? I buried my wife 2 winters back, raised 3 children alone. Trouble and I are old acquaintances. Mills studied him. Your Elizabeth would be proud. She'd be furious at what they did to that woman. That too. The doctor mounted his horse. Be careful, Caleb. Fear makes people do terrible things. After he left, Caleb found Emma hovering by Margaret's door, clutching something behind her back. What have you got there, little bird? She produced a rag doll, worn from loving. Mama made her. I thought the lady might like to hold her. When I'm scared, Bessie helps. Caleb's throat tightened. That's kind of you. Go on, but quiet-like. Emma tiptoed into the room. Margaret was awake, staring at the ceiling. The little girl approached the bed like one might a wounded animal. I brought Bessie, Emma whispered. She's good at keeping bad dreams away. Margaret turned her head slowly. The child's earnest face, the offered doll, such simple kindness undid her more than any cruelty could. She accepted the doll with trembling hands. Thank you, she managed. Emma beamed. Pa says you're staying with us. I'm glad. Sarah burns the biscuits, but don't tell her I said so. Emma Stone. Sarah appeared in the doorway, hands on hips. You little tattletale! It's true. Out, you scamp. Let Miss Margaret rest. But Margaret's lips had curved in the ghost of a smile, the first since the river. Caleb saw it and felt something ease in his chest. The days blurred together. Margaret's fever broke on the third night, leaving her weak but lucid. She insisted on helping with small tasks, mending, peeling potatoes, anything to not be a burden. The children adapted to her presence with the resilience of the young. Thomas showed her his collection of bird eggs. Sarah asked her advice on needlework. Emma simply chattered, filling the silence with stories. On the fifth day, Margaret managed to walk to the porch. The October air was crisp, the cottonwoods turning gold. She sat carefully, watching Caleb split wood. The rhythmic thunk of the axe was soothing. I had a garden once, she said suddenly. Roses and vegetables all mixed together. Theodore said it was unseemly. Nothing unseemly about growing things. No. She pulled the borrowed shawl tighter. I suppose not. That evening, over a simple supper of beans and cornbread, Thomas asked the question the others had been dancing around. Are you going to stay forever? Thomas! Sarah kicked him under the table. It's all right. Margaret set down her spoon carefully. I don't know where else to go. My family's back east. They wouldn't want me now. Why not? Emma's innocent question hung in the air. Caleb cleared his throat. Sometimes families have foolish ideas about what matters. Well, I think you should stay, Emma declared. Sarah's happier with another lady around, and Pa doesn't frown as much. Emma. But it was true. The cabin felt different with Margaret there. Fuller somehow, less haunted by absence. That night, Caleb found Margaret on the porch again, wrapped in a quilt, studying the stars. Can't sleep. Habit now, I suppose. She shifted, making room for him on the bench. Your children are remarkable. They've had to be. You've done well with them. Elizabeth would... She stopped. I'm sorry. I shouldn't speak of her. Why not? She's part of this place. Part of us. He was quiet for a moment. She'd have liked you. She had strong opinions about people who mistake cruelty for righteousness. I used to think I was righteous, Margaret said softly. Following all the rules, doing what was expected. Look where it got me. Following rules and doing right aren't always the same thing. She turned to look at him then. Really look. In the moonlight. She could see the lines that grief and hard work had carved into his face, but also the kindness in his eyes, the strength in his hands. Why did you take me in? Really? Caleb considered. My parents died on the trail west. I was 15, suddenly responsible for my younger sister. A family of strangers took us in. No questions asked. Fed us, clothed us, taught us how to survive out here. He paused. The husband couldn't have children. Some folks whispered about curses then too, but they loved my sister and me like their own blood. What happened to them? Cholera. 8 years back. They're buried on their land up north. Good people. He stood. That's why, I suppose, someone showed me that family isn't always about blood or even law. It's about choosing to care for each other. Margaret sat alone after he went inside, holding Emma's doll, thinking about choosing and being chosen, about the difference between a house where she'd been tolerated and a cabin where she was welcome. The wounds on her back still pulled with every movement, might scar her forever. But for the first time since the riverside, she thought she might survive this. Inside, she heard Emma's voice, supposed to be asleep long ago. "Pa, is Miss Margaret going to be our new mama?" "Hush now. Sleep. But is she? That's not ours to decide. Little bird, now close your eyes." Margaret pressed the doll to her chest and finally, let herself cry. Not from pain or shame, but from the terrible, wonderful possibility of hope. The whispers started at church. Margaret had been with the Stone family for 2 weeks when Caleb decided she was healed enough to attend Sunday service. She'd protested. The wound still pulled. The stairs would be unbearable. But Sarah had quietly laid out one of Elizabeth's dresses, and Emma had picked late wildflowers for her hair. "We don't hide," Caleb said simply. "That's not our way." The ride to town in the wagon was quiet. Thomas sat rigid beside his father, fists clenched. He'd heard talk at the general store, knew what people were saying. Sarah held Margaret's hand, while Emma hummed hymns, oblivious or perhaps deliberately cheerful. They felt the change before they saw it. Conversations dying mid-sentence, heads turning, mothers pulling children closer. Margaret kept her eyes forward, spine straight despite the pain it caused. She'd learned that bearing long ago. The church was small, whitewashed boards and modest steeple. Reverend Paul Morrison stood at the door greeting parishioners, his face carefully neutral when he saw them approach. "Caleb, children." His eyes flickered to Margaret. "Ma'am." "Reverend." Caleb's tone was pleasant but firm. "Fine morning for worship." They took their usual pew, third from the front. Elizabeth's choice years ago. The whispers rose like buzzing flies. Margaret heard fragments. Shameless. Living in sin. Those poor children. Mrs. Theodore Walsh. The new Mrs. Walsh. Young Sarah Morton, that was. Sat across the aisle in what had been Margaret's seat. She wore Margaret's blue Sunday dress, altered to fit her fuller figure. Their eyes met briefly. The girl flushed and looked away. The sermon was on redemption. Reverend Morrison was a decent man trying to walk a narrow line, but his words about forgiveness and stone-throwing fell on deaf ears. Margaret felt the weight of judgment pressing down harder than any whip. After service, Caleb guided his family toward the door, but their path was blocked. Mayor Blackwood stood with Theodore Walsh and 3 other men, Samuel Hodge, who'd wielded the whip, Jacob Thornton, who owned the largest ranch, and Wade Garrett, whose mother had been hung for witchcraft back east. "Stone," Blackwood's voice carried across the churchyard. "A word. Not in front of my children. Your children are exactly why we need to talk." The mayor's eyes were cold. "You've taken in a cursed woman. Bad enough for you, but those young ones don't deserve—" "The only curse I see," Caleb interrupted quietly, "is grown men who think cruelty is righteousness." Theodore stepped forward, face flushed with anger or drink. "She's barren. 3 years I wasted. That's enough." Margaret spoke for the first time, voice clear and steady. "Yes, I couldn't give you children, Theodore, but perhaps the failing wasn't all mine." Gasps rippled through the gathering crowd. A woman didn't speak so to a man, especially not her former husband. Theodore's hand raised as if to strike her, but Thomas Stone moved faster. The 10-year-old boy stepped between them, chin raised in defiance. "You don't touch her." "Thomas?" Caleb's voice was low, warning, but proud. Wade Garrett laughed. An ugly sound. Boy's got more spine than sense, just like his daddy. "We're leaving." Caleb put his hand on Thomas's shoulder, the other protective at Margaret's back. "Good day, gentlemen." "This isn't over. Stone!" Blackwood called after them. "You're harboring—" But they were already walking away. Sarah and Emma flanking Margaret like small guards. Behind them, the whispers rose to a roar. The ride home was tense. Thomas vibrated with fury. Sarah was pale, and even Emma had lost her cheerfulness. Margaret stared straight ahead, hands folded carefully in her lap. "I shouldn't have come," she said finally. "I've brought trouble to your door." Trouble was already there. Caleb replied, "Now it just has a face." That evening, Margaret found him checking the locks on doors and windows, loading his rifle and pistol. "You think they'll come?" "Maybe. Garrett's been drinking heavy lately. And Theodore's got his pride stung." He glanced at her. "I meant what I said. This isn't your fault." "Isn't it? If I left, where would you go?" He turned to face her fully. "Back to town for another 100 lashes? East to family who've disowned you? No, Margaret. You stay until you choose to leave, not because they drive you out." She studied his face in the lamplight. "Why does it matter so much to you?" He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Elizabeth lost 3 babies before Emma, too early, 1 born still. Folks whispered about curses then too, said maybe God was punishing us for something." His jaw tightened. She never let them see her cry, but I held her through those nights. I know what those whispers do to a woman's heart. Margaret's breath caught. "I didn't know." Not many did. Elizabeth was private about her pain, but she'd have stood in front of that church today and told them all to go to hell. Despite everything, he smiled slightly. In kinder words, of course, she was a lady. She was lucky to have you. We were lucky to have each other. He checked the rifle again. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we start bringing in the harvest. Need all hands." But rest didn't come easy. Near midnight, Margaret heard horses approaching. She rose, wrapping a shawl around her nightgown, and found Caleb already at the window. 3 riders sat just beyond the gate. Lanterns made shadows dance across their faces. Garrett, Hodge, and a man she didn't recognize. Not Theodore, she noticed. For all his bluster, he was a coward at heart. "Stone!" Garrett's voice was slurred. "Send out the woman." Caleb stepped onto the porch, rifle visible but not raised. "Gentlemen, bit late for a social call." "This ain't social." Hodge hefted something, a rope. "Town's decided. She goes tonight, or things get unpleasant." "The only thing decided," Caleb said calmly, "is that you men are drunk and stupid. Go home." The stranger spoke up. "You got children in there. Stone, shame if something happened." The rifle swung up faster than thought. "Finish that sentence, please." Margaret appeared in the doorway. "Stop this. I'll go." "No." Sarah's voice came from behind her. The girl stood in her nightgown, holding her father's pistol with steady hands. "You won't." "Sarah, get back inside." "No, Pa, they want to hurt her for something that's not even wrong." Her young voice carried clearly. "Mama couldn't have babies either at first. Was she cursed? Should someone have whipped her?" The men shifted uneasily. Elizabeth Stone had been beloved in town, known for her kindness and good works. "That's different," Garrett muttered. "How?" Thomas appeared now, clutching a pitchfork. "How's it different?" Even little Emma emerged, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Why are the men yelling?" The tableau held, a family standing together against the night, against ignorance and cruelty. Something in it must have penetrated even drunk minds, because Hodge lowered the rope. "This ain't over," he said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "Yes," Caleb said quietly. "It is. You come here again, threaten my family again, and I'll forget I'm a Christian man. Now get." They left, but not without dark looks and darker promises. Caleb didn't lower the rifle until the hoofbeats faded completely. Inside, Margaret was shaking. "I can't. You can't keep doing this. The children—" "The children," Caleb said firmly, "just learned that standing for what's right matters more than standing with what's popular." "We're family now," Emma said sleepily, cuddling against Margaret's side. "Family protects each other." Sarah carefully unloaded the pistol, hands now trembling with delayed fear. "I was so scared, but you stood anyway," Margaret said softly, pulling the girl close. "That's what courage is." Thomas still gripped his pitchfork. "They better not come back. Thomas James Stone." Caleb's voice was sharp. "We don't look for trouble, but we don't run from it either." That's what you taught us." Father and son looked at each other across the lamp-lit room. "Finally," Caleb nodded. "That's what I taught you." Later. After the children were back in bed and the house was quiet, Margaret found Caleb still keeping watch by the window. "They'll make your life miserable. Your business? I've got good land and strong hands. Don't need their approval to feed my family. But the children, what happens when what? When they're teased? Called names? Already happens. Their mother's dead, remember?" He turned from the window. "Margaret, my children just stood up to grown men with guns to protect you. What do you think that says about where you belong?" She had no answer for that. Or rather, the answer scared her more than any threat, because belonging meant caring, and caring meant the power to be heard again. "I won't be the reason this family suffers," she said finally. Too late. But his smile took the sting from the words. "Emma's already decided you're staying, and nobody crosses Emma Stone when her mind's made up. Gets that from her mother." Outside, the October wind rattled the windows like searching fingers, but inside was warmth and light and the strange, terrifying possibility of home. The harvest moon hung fat and golden over the prairie as October gave way to November. Margaret's back had healed enough that only the deepest cuts still pulled when she moved. More importantly, she'd found her place in the rhythm of the Stone household, rising before dawn to start the fire, working alongside Sarah in the kitchen, helping Thomas with his letters, braiding Emma's hair each night. "You're humming," Sarah observed one morning as they kneaded bread together. Margaret paused, flour-dusted hands stilling. She hadn't realized. "My mother's lullaby. I used to sing it while I worked. Sing it now." So Margaret sang, soft and low, about birds flying home across the sea. Sarah joined in on the second verse, her clear voice harmonizing. From the main room came the sound of Caleb's hammer stopping, listening. These were the moments that made Margaret forget she didn't belong here. Almost. The trip to town for supplies couldn't be avoided any longer. Caleb needed nails and salt. Sarah needed thread, and they were low on coffee. Margaret steeled herself as they rode in, but this time she held her head high. At Morrison's General Store, Mrs. Morrison served them with rigid courtesy, while other customers found urgent business elsewhere. Margaret selected thread. Feeling eyes bore into her back, not the healing scars, but the ones people imagined they could see through cloth. "That'll be $2, Mrs. Morrison said, though Margaret knew the real price was half that. Before Caleb could object, Margaret placed the money on the counter. "Thank you kindly." She turned to find young Mrs. Walsh, Sarah Nee Morton, standing behind her, arms full of fabric. The girl's eyes were red-rimmed, a bruise fading on her cheek. "Margaret," she whispered. "Sarah." Margaret kept her voice neutral. Could I speak with you, please?" Margaret glanced at Caleb, who nodded slightly. They stepped outside while he finished the purchases. "I'm sorry," Sarah burst out. "About what they did, I didn't know. Theodore said you were cursed, that you'd bewitched him, but now I think—" She touched her bruised cheek unconsciously. "I think maybe the curse was his all along." Margaret's heart ached for this girl, barely more than a child herself. "Run, Sarah. Take whatever money you can and run. East, west, doesn't matter. Just go." "I can't. Sarah's hand moved to her still flat belly. 3 months along. He's happy now. Says I've proven myself." Bitter tears slipped down her cheeks. "Is this what you felt like, knowing your whole worth was between your legs?" Language. "Sarah." "It's true, though, isn't it?" The girl's pain blazed into anger. "We're not people to them, just vessels, and if the vessel's cracked, they throw it away." Margaret wanted to comfort her, but knew it would only make things worse for both of them. "Be strong, for your baby, if not yourself." "Mrs. Stone." Emma's voice carried from the wagon. "Pa says it's time." Sarah's eyes widened. They call you Mrs. Stone? The children are kind. More than kind. Sarah glanced around nervously. I should go. But Margaret, I'm glad you survived. It gives me hope that maybe I can too. She hurried away before Margaret could respond. The ride home was quiet, each lost in thought. But as they pulled into the yard, they found they weren't alone. Reverend Morrison's buggy sat by the barn. The preacher himself stood on the porch with a woman Margaret didn't recognize, middle-aged, sharp-featured, wearing the severe black of perpetual mourning. Reverend, Caleb said carefully. Miss Patterson, what brings you out here? Miss Patterson, the schoolmarm. Margaret realized. She'd heard talk of the woman's strict ways and stricter morals. Mr. Stone. Miss Patterson's voice could freeze July. I'm here about the children's education. They attend school regular when it's in session. Their academic education, yes, but their moral education is equally important. Her eyes fixed on Margaret like pins through a butterfly. I cannot have my students exposed to improper influences. Improper, Sarah started hotly. But Caleb touched her shoulder. Speak plain, Miss Patterson. Very well. This woman's presence in your home, unmarried, sets a dangerous example. I must insist that either she leaves or your children will no longer be welcome in my classroom. Emma made a small sound of distress. Thomas's hands fisted, but it was Sarah who stepped forward. Then I guess we won't be coming to school. Sarah, Caleb warned. No, Pa. Miss Margaret's been teaching me more than Miss Patterson ever did. Real things, useful things. She lifted her chin. And kind things. Miss Patterson's mouth pursed like she'd bitten into an unripe persimmon. Reverend, surely you see the harm. I see a family, Morrison said quietly. One that's faced loss and found healing. If that's harmful, then perhaps we need to re-examine our definitions. Reverend, Miss Patterson, I came here planning to counsel Caleb on propriety. But I've watched this family today, seen how they care for each other. He met Caleb's eyes. Whatever arrangement you have here, it's brought life back to this home. I won't stand against that. Miss Patterson huffed. Then you're as lost as they are. Mark my words. No good will come of harboring a barren woman. The curse will spread. The only curse I see, Margaret said, surprising everyone, including herself, is the one we create with our own cruelty. The schoolmarm recoiled as if slapped. How dare you? I dare because I've paid for daring. 100 lashes worth. Margaret's voice was steady as stone. I've been cursed and cast out and left to die, and yet here I stand, helping raise 3 beautiful children who chose to claim me as their own. If that's not God's grace, I don't know what is. Reverend Morrison's eyes were suspiciously bright. Amen. Miss Patterson left in a fury of dust and indignation. Morrison lingered, accepting Sarah's offer of coffee. They sat on the porch as the sun headed toward the horizon. You've made powerful enemies. The Reverend said, Blackwood's talking about calling a town meeting, about the moral decay threatening our community. Let them talk. Caleb sipped his coffee. Talk's cheap. Sometimes talk leads to action. You remember what happened to the Hendricks family? Margaret didn't know the story, but saw how Caleb's face darkened. That was different. Was it? A family that didn't fit the town's idea of proper? Morrison stood. I'll do what I can. Speak for moderation, but you should be prepared. After he left, Emma climbed into Margaret's lap. Are we not going to school anymore? We'll figure something out, sweetheart. I don't mind. You teach better anyway. Miss Patterson says women shouldn't read too much, but you let me read anything. Reading's important, Margaret agreed, smoothing the child's hair. Mama thought so too. She hid books sometimes when company came, said some folks didn't understand that smart women weren't dangerous. That evening, as Margaret helped prepare supper, she found herself truly part of the routine. Thomas set the table without being asked. Sarah chatted about plans for preserving the last of the garden vegetables. Emma practiced her letters on a slate. tongue poking out in concentration. This was family. Not the cold, proper household she'd known with Theodore, where every moment was measured against her failure to conceive. This was messy and warm and real. "Margaret?" Caleb stood in the doorway. "Could I speak with you?" They walked to the barn, late afternoon light slanting through the gaps in the boards. He seemed to struggle for words. The Reverend was right. This could get worse. Blackwood's got influence, and fear's a powerful thing. He met her eyes. "I need to know you're prepared for what might come. Are you asking me to leave?" "No." The word came quick and firm. "I'm asking if you're prepared to stay, really stay, not as a guest or hired help, but as part of this family. The children already see you that way. Question is, do you?" Margaret's heart raced. "Caleb, I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give, but if you're staying, then we face whatever comes together. No more talk of leaving for our sake. We're past that now." She thought of Sarah's trust, Thomas's protection, Emma's easy affection, of Caleb's steady presence and quiet strength, of a home where she was valued for more than her empty womb. "Yes," she said simply. "I'm staying." He smiled then, the expression transforming his weathered face. "Good, because Emma's been after me to build another room onto the cabin come spring, and I'd hate to disappoint her." "Another room? Can't have you sleeping in Sarah's room forever." He paused. "Unless you'd rather—" The unspoken possibility hung between them. Margaret felt heat rise to her cheeks like a green girl. Not a woman grown and once married. One step at a time, she managed. "One step at a time," he agreed. As they walked back to the cabin, the first stars were appearing. Inside, warm light spilled from windows, and children's laughter drifted on the evening air. Home, Margaret thought. The word no longer felt foreign on her tongue. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Blackwood would scheme, the town would whisper, and Miss Patterson would certainly make good on her threat. But tonight, Margaret Walsh. No, that name belonged to another life. Tonight, the woman who was learning to be Margaret Stone sat down to supper with her family and let herself believe in second chances. "Can I say grace tonight?" Emma asked. "Of course, little bird." The child's prayer was simple but heartfelt, thanking God for food and family, and especially for bringing Miss Margaret to us when we needed her and she needed us. "Amen," they chorused. And in that moment, Margaret finally understood that sometimes the greatest blessing comes disguised as the greatest curse. She'd lost everything that town had told her mattered. In return, she'd gained everything that actually did. The smell of smoke woke Margaret first. Not the comfortable scent of hearth fire, but something acrid. Wrong. She sat up in the darkness, instantly alert. "Fire!" Caleb's shout came a heartbeat later. "Everyone out, now!" Margaret grabbed Emma from her bed, the child still heavy with sleep. Sarah was already moving, pulling on boots, reaching for coats. Through the window, orange light danced. The barn was ablaze. "The animals!" Thomas started for the door, but Caleb caught him. "Together." "We go together." Outside, the November night was torn by flames reaching toward the stars. The horses screamed in terror, their cries cutting through the roar of fire. Without hesitation, Caleb plunged toward the barn doors. "Take the children to the well," he shouted to Margaret. But Thomas was already running after his father, and Sarah had grabbed buckets. This family didn't stand by while others fought. "Emma, stay here." Margaret set the child down and seized a bucket. "Don't move!" The heat hit like a physical blow. Caleb had gotten the doors open, and the horses bolted out, wild-eyed with fear. The milk cow followed, bellowing. "But the new calf—" "She's trapped!" Thomas pointed to the far stall where flames hadn't yet reached. Caleb started forward, but a beam crashed down, blocking the path. The smoke was thickening, stealing breath and sight. "I can fit." Thomas ducked under his father's restraining arm. "No." But Margaret was already moving, smaller than Caleb. She slipped through the gap between burning wood and stone wall. The heat seared her lungs, brought back memories of a different kind of burning. But she pushed forward. The calf was tangled in rope, panicking. Margaret's fingers fumbled with the knots as embers fell like hellish snow. The rope finally gave, and she half pushed, half carried the animal toward safety. "Margaret," Caleb's voice, desperate. A section of roof collapsed behind her. She shoved the calf through the gap and felt strong hands pull her after. They stumbled away as more of the structure gave way, the barn becoming a pillar of fire against the night. They fought it with buckets and determination, but it was hopeless. The barn was gone. They managed to keep it from spreading to the cabin, soaking the roof and walls until their hands were raw and their backs screaming. Dawn found them slumped on the ground, covered in soot and ash. The barn was a smoking skeleton. Most of the winter feed was gone. Tools, harness, all destroyed. "Pa?" Emma's small voice broke the silence. She held something in her hands. Her doll, Bessie, somehow clutched through the night. "Are we going to be all right?" Caleb pulled his youngest close. "We're alive. We're together. That makes us all right." But Margaret saw the truth in his eyes. Winter was coming. Without the barn, without feed for the animals, without tools, this could break them. Thomas kicked at a charred beam. "It weren't no accident. Thomas, look! Pa!" The boy pointed to the ground near where the barn door had been. Even through the ash, they could see it, the remains of an oil lamp. Not theirs. Caleb's jaw tightened, but he said only, "We don't know for sure." "Don't we?" Sarah's voice was bitter. "After Miss Patterson's threats? After those men came here?" As if summoned by her words, riders appeared on the horizon. Margaret tensed, but it was Dr. Mills leading them, with Reverend Morrison and, surprisingly, several other townspeople. "Saw the smoke," Mills said, dismounting. "Came as quick as we could." The men surveyed the damage grimly. Morrison picked up the lamp remains, face darkening. "This is beyond the pale. Can't prove nothing." One of the men muttered, Harold Carson, who ran the feed store since Theodore spent more time drinking than working. "Don't need proof to know right from wrong." Morrison replied sharply. "We brought what we could," Mills said, gesturing to the wagon behind them. "Some feed. Tools folks could spare. It's not much, but—" "It's kind of you." Caleb's voice was carefully neutral. Trust came hard after betrayal. As the men unloaded supplies, Margaret noticed a figure hanging back. Young Sarah Walsh. Shawl pulled tight despite the morning sun. She carried a basket, approaching Margaret hesitantly. "I heard about the fire. I brought—" She lifted the cloth to reveal preserves. Bread. A precious bag of sugar. "It's not much. You shouldn't be here," Margaret said gently. "If Theodore finds out—" "He's passed out drunk. Has been since yesterday." Sarah's hand went to her belly. "I had to come. Had to do something. Mrs. Morrison appeared at Margaret's elbow. The Reverend's wife was a force of nature wrapped in calico. "Sarah Walsh, you march yourself right over to my buggy. You're coming home with me." "I couldn't—" "Nonsense. You need a safe place until that baby comes, and I need help with the parish work." Her eyes were fierce. "Any objections can be taken up with the Almighty." As Sarah was led away, Margaret felt a mix of relief and worry. The girl would be safe with the Morrisons, but Theodore wouldn't take his wife's absence well. The day wore on in a blur of activity. Neighbors who'd shunned them yesterday now worked alongside them, clearing debris, sharing what they could. Not everyone, the Blackwoods and Garretts were notably absent, but enough to matter. "Guilt," Caleb said quietly when Margaret wondered at the change. Fire has a way of reminding folks we're all vulnerable out here. By afternoon, they'd salvaged what they could and penned the animals in a temporary shelter. The children worked without complaint, though Emma kept looking anxiously at the empty space where the barn had stood. That evening, unexpected visitors arrived. A delegation of women, led by Mrs. Mills. They carried quilts, preserves, a ham, and Margaret's throat tightened. Baby clothes. These are too small for any young ones in town right now. Mrs., Mills said briskly, not quite meeting Margaret's eyes. Thought someone might have use for them eventually. The unspoken acceptance in that gesture nearly undid Margaret's composure. These women knew she was barren, knew the cruel reason for her scars. Yet they brought baby clothes to her home, acknowledging her as a woman who might mother children, one way or another. Thank you, she managed. Mrs. Mills patted her hand. We're not all fools, dear. Some of us remember what it's like to be judged for things beyond our control. After they left, Margaret found herself holding a tiny knitted cap, tears blurring her vision. Caleb found her there. You all right? They brought baby clothes. Her voice cracked. As if I could. You already are. He sat beside her. Mother to 3 who need you. That's different. Is it? Emma calls you Mama in her sleep sometimes. Sarah looks to you for guidance. Thomas would fight the world for you. He paused. Love makes a mother, not blood. She turned the little cap in her hands. Theodore said I was worthless, a dried-up husk. Theodore's a fool. The vehemence in Caleb's voice surprised them both. You survived 100 lashes meant to break you, helped save our animals, stand up to the whole town for my children. If that's worthless, I'll eat my boots. Your good boots. Even those. He smiled slightly. Margaret, this fire, it could have broken us. Instead, look what happened. People remembered their humanity. Sarah Walsh found courage to leave. You showed my children that family stands together no matter what. We lost so much. Things. We lost things. He gestured toward the cabin where lamplight showed the children helping Sarah prepare supper. Everything that matters survived. A rider approached through the dusk. Harold Carson again. His face was grim. Thought you should know, he said without preamble. Blackwood's called that town meeting. Tomorrow night. He's pushing for formal censure. Censure? Margaret asked. Banishment. Caleb translated. They want to run us out. Carson shifted uncomfortably. There's more. Theodore's claiming his wife was stolen by immoral influences, demanding she be returned over my dead body. Caleb said flatly. Might come to that. Carson gathered his reins. Just thought you should know. Not everyone agrees with Blackwood, but fear talks louder than sense sometimes. After he left, they stood in the gathering darkness. The smell of smoke still lingered, mixing with the promise of frost. I won't let them drive you away, Margaret said fiercely. Caleb looked at her, something shifting in his expression. When did it become about them driving me away? Thought it was you they wanted gone. She realized what she'd said, felt heat rise to her cheeks. I know what you meant. His voice was soft, and I'm glad you meant it. From the cabin, Emma's voice called them to supper. They walked back together, shoulders almost touching. Behind them, the ruins of the barn stood like broken bones against the stars. Ahead, warm light and family waited. Tomorrow would bring fresh battles. But tonight, Margaret thought as she took her place at the table, tonight they were together. The fire meant to destroy them had only forged them stronger. Pa, Thomas said suddenly. We're going to rebuild, aren't we? Yes. Bigger? Caleb glanced at Margaret. I think so. Seems we might need more room. Sarah giggled. Emma clapped, and Margaret felt something she hadn't experienced in so long she'd almost forgotten its name. Hope, not just for survival, but for a future. A real future, built from ashes and determination and love. The barn could be rebuilt. Trust could be regained. And sometimes, just sometimes, the greatest blessings rose from the deepest losses. She touched the small cap still in her pocket and smiled. The town hall had never been so packed. Every bench groaned under the weight of bodies, and men lined the walls like crows on a fence. The November cold was kept at bay by the sheer press of humanity and the heat of anticipation. Margaret entered with the Stone family. feeling every eye track their movement. She wore Elizabeth's best dress, Sarah had insisted, and kept her spine straight despite the pulling of scars. Caleb walked beside her, the children arranged around them like a small battalion. There, Reverend Morrison gestured to seats he'd saved near the front. Brave of him, Margaret thought. Association with them was becoming costly. Mayor Blackwood stood at the podium, gavel in hand, face flushed with righteous authority. Theodore Walsh sat in the front row, sporting a black eye that hadn't been there yesterday. Beside him, Wade Garrett smirked. "This emergency meeting will come to order," Blackwood boomed. "We're here to address a matter of moral urgency threatening our community." "What threat?" "Doctor," Mills called out. "The only emergency I see is good folks having their barns burned." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Blackwood hammered his gavel. "The fire is precisely why we're here. Divine judgment, some might say, on those who harbor, say it plain, Cornelius." Mrs. Morrison stood, all 5 feet of her radiating contempt. "You're talking about the Stone family. Have the courage to name them." Blackwood's face darkened. "Very well. Caleb Stone has taken into his home a woman of questionable virtue. A barren woman, cast out for failing her sacred duty. Now living unmarried with a widower and his children. She's our friend," Emma's voice piped up, clear and indignant. "Hush, child," someone muttered. "I will not hush." Emma stood on her bench. "Miss Margaret saved our calf and teaches me letters and makes Pa smile again." "Emma," Caleb said gently, but his eyes glowed with pride. Theodore lurched to his feet. "That woman poisoned my wife against me." "Sarah's gone because of her influence. Sarah left because you hit her," Margaret said, standing slowly, every head turned. "Just like you hit me, though you preferred other methods. You were disciplined according to law." "Whose law?" Margaret's voice carried to every corner. "Show me where it's written that a woman should receive 100 lashes for the crime of an empty womb. Show me the statute that makes barrenness a sin. The Bible says be fruitful and multiply." Garrett called out. "The Bible says many things." Reverend Morrison interjected, "Including judge not lest ye be judged. Don't quote scripture at me, preacher." Blackwood snarled. "You've been corrupted by their influence too. Or perhaps," Morrison said mildly, "I've remembered what Christianity actually means." The crowd stirred uneasily. This wasn't going as Blackwood had planned. "The point remains." The mayor pressed on. "This arrangement is improper, immoral. I propose we vote. Either the woman leaves town by week's end, or the entire Stone family must go." "You can't do that," Thomas shot up beside his sister. "This is our home. Your father should have thought of that before taking in a Jezebel." The word hung in the air like a slap. Caleb started to rise, but Margaret caught his arm. This was her fight. She walked to the center of the room, letting them all see her clearly. The woman who'd survived their worst, who'd helped save their neighbor's barn last spring, who taught their children when Miss Patterson turned them away. "You want to talk about morality?" Her voice was steady as stone. "Let's talk about a town that watches a woman be tortured and calls it righteous. About men who sneak through darkness to burn barns where children sleep. About Christians who throw stones while Christ himself said to love thy neighbor. You dare lecture us?" Blackwood's face was purple. "I dare because I've paid the price for your morality. Every scar on my back is a testament to what this town calls justice." She turned slowly, addressing them all. "Yes, I'm barren. Yes, I'm divorced. Yes, I live with the Stones. And yes, I've found more love and grace in that simple cabin than in all your proper homes combined." "Shameless?" someone whispered. "No," Margaret said firmly. "Not anymore. Shame is what you gave me with your whips and judgment, but shame only has power if I accept it, and I refuse." Sarah Morrison now, stood up in the back where she'd been sitting with the Reverend's wife. "She's right. We've all been accepting shame that isn't ours." Her voice trembled but carried. "I was taught my only worth was in bearing children. When Margaret couldn't conceive, you beat her for it. When I did conceive, My husband beat me anyway. Theodore started toward her. You're my wife. Harold Carson and 2 other men blocked his path. Not anymore, Carson said quietly. Reverend Morrison drew up the papers yesterday. Abandonment. You were too drunk to notice she'd been gone 3 days. The mood in the room shifted like wind changing direction. These weren't strangers they were condemning. These were neighbors, friends, women who'd shared their struggles. I've got something to say. The elderly woman stood, Mrs. Abernathy, whose husband had built the town's first store. Lost 4 babies myself before my Samuel was born. Each time, I wondered if God was punishing me, if I was cursed. She looked directly at Margaret. Nobody whipped me for it, but maybe that's only because my husband was rich enough to matter. Others began standing, sharing stories. Women who'd miscarried, couples who'd waited years for children, families broken by strict moral codes that crushed love underfoot. Blackwood hammered his gavel frantically. Order, this isn't what we're here to discuss. Isn't it? Caleb finally spoke, rising to stand beside Margaret. You called this meeting to cast out a good woman for the crime of surviving your cruelty. But what you've really done is shown this town its true face, and some of us don't like what we see. Doctor, Mills added, I call for a vote. Blackwood was desperate now. All in favor of banishing, I call for a different vote. Morrison interrupted. All in favor of leaving the Stone family in peace to live as they see fit. Hands rose throughout the room. Not everyone, perhaps not even most, but enough. Enough to matter. Enough to show that fear didn't rule everyone. Blackwood's gavel fell silent. Theodore slumped in his seat. Garrett muttered curses. Furthermore, Morrison continued, I move that any further harassment of the Stone family be met with formal charges. We're a town of laws. After all, real laws, not the whims of bitter men. Seconded. Call Dr. Mills. Thirded, added Mrs. Morrison, though that wasn't proper procedure and everyone knew it. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Some stormed out in fury. Others pressed forward to offer quiet support. In the center of it all, Margaret stood with her chosen family, feeling the earth shift beneath her feet. We did it, Emma breathed, clutching Margaret's hand. No, little bird, Margaret said softly. You did it, all of you, by standing up and speaking truth. Young Sarah Morrison pushed through the crowd, tears streaming. Thank you, both of you. I couldn't have found courage without seeing yours. As they finally made their way outside, the November stars were brilliant overhead. The crowd dispersed into the night, but the stones lingered. It's not over, Caleb warned quietly. Blackwood won't forget this humiliation. Maybe not, Margaret agreed. But tonight, we won something. Not just the right to stay, but... She searched for words. Dignity. Sarah supplied. We claimed our dignity. And each other, Thomas added, surprising them with his insight. They rode home through the cold night, but Margaret felt warm throughout. The meeting meant to destroy them had instead revealed allies they'd never known they had. The town's moral certainty had cracked, letting in light at the cabin as the children prepared for bed. Caleb caught Margaret's arm gently. What you did tonight, standing up there, facing them all, I couldn't have without you beside me. That's just it. His voice was rough with emotion. I'll always stand beside you. Margaret, if you'll have me, the children need a mother. But more than that, I want... Caleb. She touched his face, feeling the weathered skin, the strength beneath. Are you asking what I think you're asking? I'm asking wrong, probably. Elizabeth would have words about my clumsy tongue, but yes, marry me. Not for propriety or to quiet gossips. Because I love you. Because this family isn't complete without you. Margaret thought of all the reasons to say no, the scars that would never fade, the womb that would never quicken, the town that would never fully accept. Then she thought of Emma's laughter, Sarah's trust, Thomas's fierce protection, of Caleb's steady presence and gentle hands, of a home where love mattered more than bloodlines. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." From the loft came a muffled squeal, Emma, eavesdropping as usual. Then Sarah's delighted gasp and Thomas's whoop of joy. "I think the children approve," Caleb said, smiling wider than she'd ever seen. "Our children," Margaret corrected, and felt the rightness of it in her bones. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, in a cabin that had become a fortress of love against the world's cruelty. Margaret Walsh began her transformation into Margaret Stone, not through any man's decision or town's approval, but through her own choice to claim the family that had claimed her. The fire had burned their barn. The town had tried to burn their spirits, but like metal in a forge, they'd only emerged stronger. And that, Margaret thought as Caleb kissed her beneath the stars, was the greatest victory of all. The morning of the wedding dawned crisp and clear, December frost painting the prairie silver. Margaret stood in what would soon be her room, truly hers, not borrowed or temporary, wearing Elizabeth's wedding dress, altered by Sarah's careful hands. "You look beautiful," Sarah said, pinning the last adjustment. At 14, she was becoming a young woman, and the past months had given her a mother's guidance she desperately needed. "Like a fairy princess," Emma added, dancing around them in her new dress, simple calico, but she wore it like silk. Margaret's hands trembled slightly as she smoothed the fabric. The dress was cream-colored wool, practical but pretty, with small pearl buttons Elizabeth's mother had sewn on decades ago. It felt strange wearing another woman's wedding clothes, but also right, a continuation rather than replacement. "Ma?" Thomas's voice came from the doorway. He'd started calling her that just last week, casual as breathing, and it still made her heart catch. "Pa says to tell you Reverend Morrison's here." The ceremony would be small. After the town meeting's drama, they'd decided on just family and their closest allies. "Doctor." Mills would stand witness for Caleb, Mrs. Morrison for Margaret. The children, of course, were the most important guests. Margaret emerged to find the main room transformed. Emma and Sarah had woven dried flowers and winter berries into garlands. The table was pushed aside, chairs arranged in a small circle. Through the window, she could see fresh snow beginning to fall. Caleb stood by the fireplace in his Sunday best, the suit he'd worn to marry Elizabeth, now brushed and pressed. His eyes, when they found hers, held something that made her breath catch. Not the desperate need Theodore had shown, nor the possessive hunger she'd learned to fear. This was deeper, steadier, a man who'd chosen her not for what she could give him, but for who she was. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Morrison began, his voice warm in the small space, "we gather today not to create a family, for this family already exists. We gather to bless what God has already joined, hearts that have found each other through trial and hardship." Margaret barely heard the traditional words. She was too aware of Caleb's calloused hand holding hers, of the children arranged around them like small guardians. Emma held the simple gold band they'd use, Caleb's mother's ring, kept safe all these years. "Margaret," Caleb said when prompted, his voice rough with emotion, "I promise to stand beside you against whatever comes, to honor your strength, tend your wounds, both seen and unseen, and love you not despite your scars, but because of all they represent. You survived what would break most people. You chose to love when the world taught you only hurt. I promise to be worthy of that choice, every day we have left." Margaret's eyes burned. She'd prepared words, but they fled. Instead, she spoke from her heart. "Caleb, you gave me shelter when the world cast me out, but more than that, you gave me purpose. These children, our children, showed me that family isn't about blood or duty, but about choosing each other. Again and again, I promise to be the wife you deserve and the mother they need, to build a life with you based not on what we've lost, but on what we've found." "The ring?" Morrison prompted gently. Emma stepped forward solemnly, presenting the band. As Caleb slipped it onto Margaret's finger, snow began falling harder outside, blanketing the world in clean white. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Morrison smiled. "You may kiss your bride." The kiss was gentle, a promise more than passion. But the children's cheers were anything but restrained. Emma threw herself at them both. Thomas pumped his fist in the air, and Sarah wiped tears she'd deny later. "Now then, Mrs." Morrison announced briskly, "I believe we have a wedding feast to enjoy." The meal was simple but abundant. Neighbors had quietly left offerings over the past week. Fresh bread, preserved fruits, even a cake, Mrs. Mills had somehow managed. They ate and laughed. The small cabin filled with warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. "Tell the story about how you met again," Emma demanded, already knowing it by heart. So they told it, each adding details: how Emma had found Margaret by the river, how Caleb had carried her home. The children interjected their own memories. Sarah's first attempt at nursing, Thomas standing guard with his pitchfork, Emma offering her precious doll. And now we're a real family. Emma concluded with satisfaction. "We were always real." Thomas corrected. "Now we're just official." "Doctor," Mills raised his glass of cider. "To the Stones. May they continue to teach this town what courage looks like, and what love looks like, Mrs." Morrison added. They toasted with mismatched cups and genuine joy. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside was light and laughter. As evening approached, the witnesses took their leave. Morrison paused at the door, speaking quietly to Caleb. "Blackwood's been stirring up trouble, says the marriage isn't valid, that a barren woman can't truly be a wife. Just wanted you to know." "Let him talk," Caleb replied. "We know it's true." After they left, the family settled into their evening routine with a new awareness. Sarah cleared dishes, humming softly. Thomas brought in extra wood without being asked. Emma curled up between Caleb and Margaret by the fire, content as a cat. "It's different," she announced. "But good different." "What's different, little bird?" "Everything, but also nothing." She frowned, working through the thought. "You were already our ma. Pa was already happy again. We were already family. But now it's settled, like when you plant seeds and they finally grow roots." "Out of the mouths of babes," Margaret murmured, stroking Emma's hair. As bedtime neared, Sarah approached hesitantly. "I fixed up your room, your real room, if you want to see." The small space off the main room had been Elizabeth's sewing room, then storage. Now it was clean and fresh, with a wedding quilt on the bed. Sarah's secret project these past weeks. Simple squares of fabric, some from Elizabeth's scraps, some from Margaret's ruined dress from that terrible day, all sewn together into something new and beautiful. "Sarah, it's perfect." The girl blushed. "I wanted you to have something that was just yours, not borrowed or handed down, but made for you." Margaret pulled her close. "Thank you, daughter." Sarah's breath hitched at the word. Then she hugged back fiercely. Later, with the children abed and snow muffling all sound, Margaret sat brushing her hair in her new room. Caleb knocked softly at the door frame. "May I?" She nodded, suddenly shy. They were married now, but the weight of her past sat heavy between them. Theodore had been cruel in their marriage bed, blaming her for his failures, taking what he wanted without gentleness. "Margaret." Caleb sat beside her, not touching. "I need you to know. We go at your pace. Always. What happened before? With him. That's not what this is. I know." And she did. Caleb had proven himself in 1,000 small ways. "I'm not afraid. Not of you. But I'm different now. The scars are proof of your strength." He touched her hand carefully. "Margaret, I fell in love with a woman who stood bleeding but unbroken, who taught my children that dignity can't be beaten out of someone, who faced down the entire town rather than bow to their cruelty." "Why would I want you to be anything but exactly who you are?" She turned to face him fully then, seeing the truth in his eyes. This man who'd raised 3 children alone, who'd opened his home to a stranger, who'd stood against his community for what was right. He was offering not just desire, but partnership, understanding, time. "I love you," she said simply. I didn't think I'd ever say those words again, didn't think I'd mean them, but I do. His smile was answer enough. When he kissed her this time, it was different from the ceremony, deeper, a claiming and a yielding both. "Welcome home, Mrs. Stone," he whispered against her lips. "I've been home," she replied, "since the day Emma found me by the river." Outside, the snow continued to fall, erasing the old landscape and creating something new. Inside, two wounded people began the careful, tender work of building a marriage based not on duty or desperation, but on choice, on love, on the family they'd already made and the future they'd face together. From the loft came Emma's voice, supposed to be sleeping. "Are they married now? Sarah? Really, truly married?" "Hush and sleep," Sarah replied, but her voice was warm. "Yes, really, truly." "Good. I was tired of waiting." Margaret laughed softly against Caleb's shoulder. "So was I, little bird. So was I." The oil lamp burned low, casting gentle shadows. Tomorrow would bring its challenges, Blackwood's continued harassment, winter's hardships, the ongoing work of rebuilding. But tonight was for new beginnings. Tonight, Margaret Walsh was truly gone, and Margaret Stone could finally, fully begin. Spring arrived like a blessing after the harsh winter. The prairie burst into color, wildflowers carpeting the land in purple and gold, the cottonwoods unfurling tender green leaves. Margaret stood on the porch of the Stone homestead, watching Caleb and Thomas work on the new barn's frame, their hammers ringing in rhythm. "Ma, Ma!" Emma came running from the chicken coop, braids flying. "Buttercup laid 12 eggs. Can we hatch them all?" "We'll see. Little bird, bring them in carefully." It had been 4 months since the wedding, and the title, Ma, no longer made Margaret's heart skip. It settled into her bones like belonging, like truth. The winter had been hard, but not impossible. Wade Garrett had been caught stealing from the general store, too drunk to cover his tracks. His arrest had broken Blackwood's hold on the more violent faction of the town. Theodore Walsh had disappeared one night, leaving debts and bitter memories. Some said he'd gone to California. Margaret hoped young Sarah Morrison never had to see him again. "Letter for you, Mrs. Stone." Harold Carson rode up, dismounting with a grin. He'd become a regular visitor, one of many who'd shifted allegiances after the town meeting. "From back east, looks like." Margaret's hand stilled. She'd written to her sister months ago, not expecting a response. The family had made their position clear when she'd married Theodore. A divorced woman was dead to them. "Thank you. Harold, will you stay for coffee?" "Can't today, but Mrs. Carson says to tell you she'll be by tomorrow for the quilting bee." After he left, Margaret stared at the letter. Sarah emerged from the cabin, flour dusting her apron. At 15, she'd grown into a confident young woman, her skills in managing the household remarkable. "What is it, Ma?" "Letter from my sister." Margaret turned it over, afraid to open it. "Only one way to find out what it says," Sarah said gently. Margaret broke the seal with trembling fingers. The script was familiar, Martha's careful hand. "Dearest Margaret," she read aloud. "Your letter reached us after many months of travel. I wept to read of your trials. Please know that whatever Father says, you have not been forgotten. Not by me." The letter went on, telling of family news, Martha's own children, their mother's declining health. Then, at the end, "I am sending this with a package that should arrive separately. Mother doesn't know. It's from her mother. Your namesake's things. She would want you to have them. You write of the children you're raising. Perhaps someday I'll meet these lucky souls who call you mother. All my love." "Martha, that's wonderful," Sarah breathed. "She still loves you." "Family," Margaret murmured, folding the letter carefully. "It comes in many forms." A week later, the package arrived. A small trunk containing quilts, photographs, and, surprisingly, a leather journal. Margaret's grandmother's diary, full of recipes, remedies, and wisdom from another generation of strong women. But the most precious discovery came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Morrison arrived one afternoon with young Sarah Walsh Morrison, whose belly was now round with child. "I need to tell you something," the young woman said, twisting her hands nervously. "About Theodore, about why you couldn't conceive." Margaret's chest tightened. "Sarah, that's past. No, please. I need to say this." Sarah took a deep breath. "He caught mumps as a young man. Doctor, Mills told me it can make men unable to father children. Theodore knew. His first wife confided in my mother before she died. She never conceived either." The words hit Margaret like a physical blow. All those years of blame, the 100 lashes, the shame and exile, all for Theodore's lie. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew it was him." "He knew," Sarah confirmed, tears rolling down her cheeks. "And he let you suffer for it. Let the town torture you for his failing." Margaret sat heavily, mind reeling. Caleb, who'd been listening from the doorway, crossed to her in 2 strides. "I'll kill him," he said flatly. "No." Margaret caught his hand. "No, he's gone, and I'm here. I have you, our children, this life. That's my justice." But the town had other ideas about justice. Word spread quickly. It always did. By Sunday, the atmosphere at church was electric with gossip and recrimination. Those who'd participated in Margaret's punishment sat uncomfortable in their pews, unable to meet her eyes. After service, Mayor Blackwood himself approached, hat literally in hand. "Mrs. Stone," he began stiffly. "It seems, that is, we've learned. Perhaps mistakes were made." "Mistakes?" Margaret's voice could have frozen July. "Is that what you call 100 lashes on an innocent woman's back?" He flushed. "The town acted on the information we had. The town acted on cruelty disguised as righteousness." She interrupted. "And I'll wear the scars forever." "But you know what, Mayor? I'm grateful." He blinked. "Grateful?" "Yes, because those scars led me here, to a real husband who loves me for who I am, not what I can produce. To children who needed a mother as much as I needed them. To a community of people who judge by character, not by empty wombs." She looked around at the gathering crowd, the Morrisons, Dr. Mills, the Carsons, and dozens of others who'd become true neighbors. "I couldn't carry life in my body," she continued, her voice carrying clear and strong. "So God placed it in my hands instead. 3 beautiful children who call me Ma. Young women like Sarah Morrison who come to me for guidance. A husband who sees me as a partner, not property." Emma tugged at her skirt. "Don't forget the chickens. Ma, you're raising 12 new chicks, too." Laughter rippled through the crowd, breaking the tension. Margaret smiled down at her youngest. "Yes, little bird, the chickens, too." Blackwood retreated, defeated by joy he couldn't understand. Others pressed forward, women who whispered apologies, men who offered to help finish the barn. The wound in the community began, slowly, to heal. That evening, the Stone family gathered on their porch to watch the sunset paint the prairie gold. The new barn stood proud against the sky, larger than the old one, built by neighbors who'd remembered how to be neighbors. Thomas whittled a toy for Sarah Morrison's coming baby. Sarah, Stone, worked on her endless quilt, adding new squares from fabric given by the ladies in town. Emma chased fireflies, her laughter bright as the tiny lights. "Regrets?" Caleb asked quietly, taking Margaret's hand. She thought of the life she'd planned. A proper house in town, a husband in trade, children of her body. Then she looked at what she had, this ramshackle cabin full of love, a husband who'd seen her at her worst and chosen her anyway, children who'd claimed her heart completely. "Never," she said firmly. "Not one." From inside came a baby's cry. The Hendersons had stopped by, their newborn fussy with colic. Margaret rose automatically. "I'll get the peppermint tea," she said. "Sarah, bring the warm compresses." As she tended the baby, showing the young mother how to ease its discomfort, Margaret felt the truth of her own words to Blackwood. She was raising life, not just her own children, but the community's, teaching, healing, nurturing. The barren woman had become the most fruitful of all. Later, as stars emerged in the vast prairie sky, the family prepared for bed. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and blessings. The barn needed finishing, the crops needed tending, the children needed raising. But tonight, Margaret Stone sat surrounded by the family she'd chosen and who'd chosen her. The scars on her back barely pulled anymore, covered by the gentle hands of a husband who saw them as marks of honor. The empty ache in her womb had been filled by the laughter of children who called her mother. "I love you," Emma murmured sleepily, cuddling close for her good-night hug. "Love you too, little bird. Forever and always? Forever and always." As Margaret tucked her youngest into bed, she marveled at the journey that had brought her here. From the riverside where she'd been left to die to this cabin where she'd learned to truly live. The woman they'd tried to break had instead been transformed, not into what the town expected, but into what her family needed. Outside, spring peepers sang their evening chorus. Inside, the Stone family settled into sleep, safe in the knowledge that love makes a family, courage makes a stand, and sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as the deepest wounds. Margaret Stone, once Margaret Walsh, closed her eyes and smiled. She was home. Thank you for listening to this story of love, resilience, and family in the Old West. Where are you tuning in from today? We'd love to hear your thoughts about Margaret's journey. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel and share what touched your heart in this tale. Your comments help us connect as one big family across the miles, just like the Stones.